Have you ever seen someone on a crowded street who looked almost exactly like you, not like a distant cousin or a passing resemblance, but close enough to make your body hesitate before your mind could explain it? Same posture, same coat, same tired expression under the same afternoon light. For a few seconds, the world seems to lose its depth. The sidewalk becomes a screen. The strangers around you become background figures. And somewhere in that ordinary moment, a strange question rises quietly. How many times can reality repeat itself before we notice? We usually dismiss these moments. A coincidence, a trick of memory, a face shaped by familiar genes. But the feeling remains small and cold, like touching a window at night and realizing someone may be standing on the other side. This is not a story about certainty. It is a journey through patterns, perception, repetition, and the human fear that the world may be less solid than it appears. If reality were a system, would it ever conserve resources? Would it reuse faces, shapes, scenes, and memories? And if it did, would the first evidence appear as catastrophe or as something almost too ordinary to notice? It begins with an idea borrowed from video games, where entire forests, cities, and planets can be created without an artist designing every leaf or stone by hand. The term is procedural generation. Instead of building every object individually, a system follows rules. It creates variation from a smaller set of instructions. A mountain range can unfold from mathematics. 1,000 rooms can emerge from a few patterns. A distant landscape can feel vast, even when it is being assembled only as the player approaches. This is not mysterious in itself. It is engineering, a practical way to create scale. But as our digital worlds become more convincing, they offer a strange mirror for thinking about our own. When a game repeats a tree too often, we notice. When two non-player characters walk in the same rhythm, wearing the same jacket, the illusion becomes thin. The world still functions, but its machinery begins to show. Human life has always been surrounded by repetition. Cities have uniforms. Factories produce identical objects. Fashion travels quickly through crowds. But the modern eye, trained by screens, surveillance footage, and endless online clips, has become unusually sensitive to patterns. A group of strangers in matching black coats at a train station can become a question. A line of commuters moving with mechanical precision can feel like a loop. The unease does not prove anything about reality, but it does reveal something about us. Once we learn how artificial worlds are made, we start wondering whether the natural world has seams of its own. There are photographs that feel wrong before we know why. A cloud with edges too straight. A crowd where 3 people appear to be wearing the same shirt, carrying the same bag, leaning at the same angle. A street scene where faces blur into a repeated softness, as if the camera caught not individuals, but placeholders. Most of these images have simple explanations: compression artifacts, camera distortion, fashion trends, the statistical certainty that, in a city of millions, coincidence will eventually dress itself as design. Still, the emotional effect is real. A square cloud against a pale blue sky can disturb us because clouds are supposed to be irregular. They are supposed to drift, dissolve, and refuse geometry. When they appear too ordered, something ancient in us pays attention. The internet has become an archive of such moments. Not an archive in the scholarly sense, but a restless collection of visual oddities, found footage, street clips, and half-remembered stories. People gather around them not always because they believe, but because they recognize the feeling. It is the feeling of seeing the world behave like an image. In older centuries, mystery often lived in ruins, forests, oceans, and stars. Today, it also lives in pixels and reflections. We no longer need a haunted castle to feel the unknown. Sometimes all it takes is a bus stop, 3 matching umbrellas, and the suspicion that a pattern has repeated one time too many. The phrase NPC began as a technical term, but it has become a cultural metaphor. In games, a non-player character fills the world. They walk through marketplaces, sit in taverns, cross streets, and give the illusion that life continues beyond the hero's attention. Their purpose is not to be false, but to make the environment feel alive. When people use that word for real strangers, it can become careless and dehumanizing. Every person in a crowd has a private history, a childhood, griefs, errands, memories, and reasons for being exactly where they are. A mature view must never forget that. Yet the metaphor persists because crowded cities can overwhelm the mind. At Times Square, Shibuya Crossing, Oxford Street, or a subway platform at rush hour, the human brain cannot hold every person as fully individual. It compresses, it groups, it creates categories: dark coat, white sneakers, phone in hand, walking north. From that compression comes the illusion of duplication. A dozen people in similar jackets moving toward the same train can seem like copied background entities. Not because they are copies, but because the human eye searches for efficiency just as machines do. And this raises a more subtle question. If our own perception uses shortcuts to survive the crowd, then when we think we are seeing a glitch in reality, are we actually seeing a glitch in ourselves? Long before computers gave us language for simulation, nature was already full of repeating forms. A fern curls into smaller ferns. Frost branches across glass like pale lightning. Rivers divide into tributaries, blood vessels split into capillaries, and galaxies gather in luminous filaments across distances so large the mind can only approach them through analogy. Fractals are not laziness in any moral sense. They are efficiency. They are rules repeating at different scales, producing complexity without endless invention. A snowflake is not copied from a template, yet it emerges from conditions that guide water molecules into symmetry. A spiral shell is not designed for our astonishment, yet it follows growth patterns that mathematics can describe. Still, there is something emotionally unsettling about recurrence in nature. It suggests that variety may not require unlimited imagination. A few deep rules may produce forests, coastlines, lungs, storms, and stars. This is where the speculative idea of a mirror loop enters the story, not as a proven model, but as a metaphor. Maybe reality feels vast because its patterns are folded, reflected, and recombined. Maybe the universe does not need infinite originality to appear infinite to us. The thought is both beautiful and disquieting. It makes creation seem elegant but also economical. And once we see repetition in leaves and galaxies, we begin to wonder whether the same principle might extend beyond shape, into memory, experience, and time itself. Déjà vu arrives without warning, usually in the most ordinary places. A kitchen doorway, a motel hallway, a conversation at a dinner table, the angle of a lamp beside a window while someone says a sentence you feel you have already heard. For a moment, the present seems to wear the clothing of the past. You know you have not lived this exact moment before, and yet the certainty is strangely physical. It is not an idea so much as a pressure behind the eyes. Science offers careful explanations. Déjà vu may involve timing errors in memory processing, where the brain tags a fresh perception as familiar before conscious awareness can correct it. It may come from partial similarity, where a new place echoes the layout or emotional texture of somewhere forgotten. The evidence is incomplete, but the natural explanations are strong. The cache metaphor gives the experience a cinematic language. In computing, cached data is stored for faster reuse. The system does not rebuild everything from nothing. It retrieves what it has already prepared. Under this metaphor, déjà vu feels like an old scene being loaded under new lighting. That does not mean the world is literally recycling moments. But the metaphor matters because it captures the emotional truth of the experience. Memory is not a vault. It is a living process, fragile and reconstructive. And if our sense of reality depends on memory, then the border between the world and our interpretation of it may be thinner than we like to admit. The midpoint of this mystery is not the possibility that reality is broken. It is the possibility that reality may be working exactly as it should, and that repetition is one of its most basic languages. This changes the tone of the entire question. The repeated face on the street, the matching crowd, the fractal coastline, the sudden déjà vu. These may not be malfunctions. They may be signs of a universe that builds meaning through recurrence. Music depends on repetition. So does memory. So does ritual. The human heart itself is a rhythm repeating until it stops. Without cycles, there would be no seasons, no sleep, no language, no recognition of home. A system that never reused patterns would be chaos. A world with no repetition would not feel more real. It might feel impossible to inhabit. This is the quiet reversal. The evidence that seems to suggest a reality running out of memory may also suggest something older and more profound. That pattern is how reality becomes intelligible. Still, the unease does not disappear. Because some repetitions feel natural, while others feel staged. A spiral shell does not trouble us. Three strangers moving in identical rhythm under a flickering station light might. So the question shifts. Not whether reality repeats, but when repetition crosses the invisible line between order and anomaly. And at that line, the stories become stranger. Some accounts of reality glitches involve rooms. A person enters an apartment and sees, for one impossible second, a version of themselves sitting at a table. Another turns a corner in a hallway and glimpses a figure wearing their clothes walking away. Someone wakes at night and feels that the room has been duplicated, slightly offset, like two transparencies laid over each other. These stories circulate as anecdotes, not verified records. They belong to the borderland between memory, dream, stress, folklore, and interpretation. The responsible thing is to say clearly, we do not have solid evidence that people are meeting copies of themselves from other dimensions. But we do have evidence that human perception can produce powerful, convincing experiences under certain conditions. Sleep paralysis, migraine aura, dissociation, grief, and neurological events can all alter the sense of presence, body, and space. The mind can place a figure in a room with astonishing force. The concept of dimension bleeding gives these experiences a speculative frame. It imagines reality as layered, with thin partitions between possible versions of a place. When the partition weakens, two scenes overlap. A person sees a self that belongs to another track of time. As science, it remains unproven. As metaphor, it is haunting. Because many people have felt at least once that their life could have gone another way. A different city, a different marriage, a different choice made years ago. The double in the room may be less a visitor from another dimension than the shape of everything we did not become. If there are cracks in reality, they rarely announce themselves as cracks. They appear as inconsistencies, a remembered object in the wrong place, a street that seems longer than it should, a familiar building that feels subtly altered. Most of the time, the explanation is ordinary. Memory shifts. Cities change, attention fails. The mind fills gaps and later mistakes its own repairs for original evidence. Yet ordinary explanations do not make the experience meaningless. A misplaced photograph can disturb a family because it touches the fragile trust we place in continuity. We believe yesterday remains behind us in stable form. We believe the kitchen is the kitchen, the road is the road, the face in the mirror is ours. The fear of a memory leak in reality is really a fear that continuity itself may be unstable. In computing, a memory leak happens when a system fails to release resources it no longer needs. Slowly, invisibly, the machine becomes burdened. Processes slow down. Errors appear. Eventually, something must close, freeze, or restart. Applied to the universe, the idea is only speculation, a poetic borrowing from technology. But it resonates because our lives also accumulate unreleased memory. Regret, unfinished grief, old rooms, old voices, old versions of ourselves. Maybe the most unsettling glitches are not signs that the cosmos is failing. Maybe they are reminders that human consciousness is always trying to hold too much at once. History is full of resets, though science gives them names far older than software. Mass extinctions, climate shifts, volcanic winters, asteroid impacts. collapses of civilizations that once believed their walls, roads, and gods would endure. The Earth has been remade many times, not by a computer rebooting, but by geology, atmosphere, biology, and chance. The idea of a system reset becomes powerful because it compresses these vast transformations into a modern image. A screen freezes, a program fails, then everything goes dark before returning in a changed state. Human beings have always translated cosmic uncertainty into the language of their age. Ancient cultures imagined floods, fires, underworld journeys, and celestial omens. The industrial age imagined machines. The digital age imagines code, memory, and simulations. This does not prove that reality is computational. It shows that our metaphors evolve with our tools. Still, the comparison has emotional force. If a world can change so completely that entire species vanish, then stability is not guaranteed. If memory is stored in fossils, ruins, ice cores, and human stories, then extinction is also a kind of data loss. The question becomes less about whether a hidden system will reset the world and more about whether we are paying attention to the fragile systems we already know we depend on. Forests, oceans, climate, memory, trust. The larger mystery may not be beyond reality at all. It may be whether we can recognize warning signs before they become history. There is a strange tenderness in the way people report glitches. They do not always speak with certainty. Often they speak with hesitation. They say, "I know how this sounds." They say, "Maybe I imagined it." They say, "I have never forgotten it." This humility matters. It separates wonder from dogma. The most interesting mysteries are not the ones that demand belief, but the ones that reveal how carefully people try to understand experiences that do not fit neatly into language. A man sees a stranger with his face. A woman enters a room and feels time fold. A child watches square-edged clouds drift over a schoolyard and later remembers them as a private rupture in the ordinary world. The stories may not prove the structure of reality, but they do prove that reality is experienced through feeling as much as measurement. A clock can say noon. A photograph can show a street. But neither can fully capture the sensation of walking through life and suddenly feeling that the surface has thinned. There is a human need beneath these accounts. The need to believe that unusual experiences are not meaningless. That the mind, even when mistaken, is responding to something worth examining. The challenge is to remain open without surrendering judgment. To listen without exaggerating. To wonder without turning every shadow into evidence. Because the deeper we go, the more the mystery begins to reflect us back to ourselves. The mirror loop is not only an image of repetition, it is an image of attention. Stand between two mirrors, and the body repeats into distance, smaller and dimmer each time. Nothing new is being created, and yet the corridor seems endless. The illusion depends on position, light, angle, and the willingness of the eye to follow. Reality may work this way in less literal terms. A single event can repeat through memory for decades. A parent's phrase can become a child's inner voice. An old fear can appear in new relationships, wearing different clothes but moving with the same rhythm. When people say the world is becoming more alike, they may be noticing something real in culture. Global brands, identical airports, algorithmic recommendations, mass-produced neighborhoods, repeated images online. The sameness is not supernatural. It is economic, technological, and social. But its emotional effect resembles the imagined memory problem. Too many copies, too many templates, too much life shaped by the same invisible systems. The old mystery of the double has moved into a modern world of duplicated products, cloned feeds, and faces filtered toward the same ideal. We fear copy-paste reality because, in some ways, we already live inside one. This is where the speculative and the practical meet. The question is not only whether the universe repeats, it is whether human culture is teaching us to experience repetition as destiny. And if sameness is partly made by us, then perhaps noticing it is the first act of resistance. To observe carefully is not the same as becoming afraid. It is a way of returning to the world. Look at the cloud before naming it. Watch the crowd before reducing it to a pattern. Notice the face of a stranger without turning them into a symbol. The antidote to a flattened reality may be attention, patient and humane. The smallest details often restore depth. A scuff on a shoe, a hand wrapped around a paper cup, the uneven way someone walks after a long day, a window glowing above a dark street where another private life is unfolding beyond our knowledge. These details resist duplication because they remind us that sameness is never complete. Even two people in identical coats carry different histories inside them. Even a repeated pattern in nature contains variation at the edge. A snowflake belongs to a category, but also to a moment that will never happen again. This does not dissolve the mystery. It refines it. The world may be built from repeated rules, but life is experienced in particulars. The machine, if there is one, is not the whole story. The code, if such a thing exists beneath appearances, cannot fully explain the ache of memory, the dignity of attention, or the fragile uniqueness of a passing hour. Maybe reality feels most solid when we stop demanding that it be simple. And maybe the cracks we notice are not invitations to panic, but invitations to look more deeply. So we return to the stranger on the street. The person who looked like you. The face that made the afternoon pause. The moment when the crowd seemed arranged, the air seemed too still, and the world briefly felt less like a place than a question. There may be no cosmic error there. No hidden server, no exhausted memory, no failed rendering of the human scene. It may have been chance, perception, fashion, biology, and the brain's ancient hunger for pattern. But the feeling was real, and that is where the mystery remains worth keeping. Not as a claim that reality is broken, but as a reminder that our experience of reality is delicate, layered, and unfinished. We live inside a universe that repeats and surprises, conceals and reveals, explains itself through laws, yet still leaves room for wonder. If there is a warning in these strange repetitions, it may not be that a system reset is coming. It may be that we should not move through life half awake, letting the world become background. Watch the small things, the cloud edge, the mirrored hallway, the rhythm of footsteps behind you, the familiar room that suddenly feels new. And if you have ever seen a moment that seemed to slip, repeat, or open at the edges, remember it carefully. Not because it proves the impossible, but because every mystery begins the same way, with a human being paying attention when the world quietly refuses to explain itself.